So in talking about what we try to create, we'd like to try and bring to life, if you like, many of the aspects of the heritage which people then can relate to. And people relate to their own type of heritage, depends on what era they grew up in, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But one of the things I want to reflect on as we head towards the Anzac weekend is our own beautiful history in regard to that. And you might be able to see this quite clearly at the moment, but this is a blazer which was worn by Harold Ball, who, and our best first year player is named the Harold Ball Memorial Trophy. Harold played 33 games, kicked 33 goals, having been recruited from Merbein up near Mildura, and he went to in his second year of AFL football as it was then. He enlisted, he went to Puckapunyal for a year, still managed to play in a premiership in 1940. The next year he went to war and he was killed in Singapore. And sadly they didn't find him for some period of time after he was lost. And when he actually when they found that he'd actually been killed, his parents brought back his blazer and presented it to the Melbourne Football Club. And it's a beautiful piece, and it's something which I think our club and our players need to understand, that if you win the best first year play and it's called the Harold Ball Trophy, or you win third best and fairest and it's Ron Barassi, or the Sid Anderson becoming second, or the Bluey Truscott, you understand what that actually does mean, and we really push that hard. And I'll be talking to the play group this week again about those messages. And I've shown this one previously. This is the 1939 Premiership Cup. There were three players who played in this grand final team, and this is the replica cup. The first ones weren't presented until 1959, but this being the 1939 one, there were three players, Anderson, Truscott and Harold Ball, who played in that game, who were later killed in action, and Ron Barassi Senior, who played in the 1940 grand final, was later killed in action too. So this is a very, very important time for our club, and as a critical reflection, I think, for all Melbourne people, and for us to understand, and we'll be unabashed in regard to making sure that people represent and understand why it's so important to our footy club. When I talk about history and heritage, the one thing which can often get lost in football clubs is the most important piece of heritage. And it's perhaps, I can reflect on this a little bit because I grew up in and around the game. I grew up at a time when my dad was secretary of the Richmond Football Club, and so my school holidays, my time growing up was in and around that club. And I used to love just being in that football environment, and perhaps without knowing it, really, my decisions in life were made for me as to what I was actually going to do in life, and I feel very fortunate that my career has become the game. But it was at that time that I realised that so much of, and that the critical thing and the lifeblood of a club is how people personalise their own heritage within the club. So whilst we'll look back on Norm Smith and Ron Barassi or Robbie Flower or Gary Lyon or Jimmy Steins as a great player, these sorts of people, the most important heritage is actually those that our supporters have within themselves. And I can go to just about any of our supporters and I say, well, you tell me the reasons why you barrack for Melbourne. And they'll reflect on a time. They could almost put a date on it. In most cases it was the day they were born, because they were born into a Melbourne family where they had no choice, and they carried that with real pride, and they've had their ups and downs and highs and lows, and almost the quality of their week was dictated by how well the team had actually performed in that particular game. But for some of them, it might have been a player who took their fancy at a particular time and they're stuck with it. But if it wasn't for that depth of heritage within individuals, our club would cease to exist, regardless of the Great War heritage, regardless of the great players, regardless of the 12 Premiership Cups. The club would cease to exist. So in reflecting on that, the most important people and the most important thing that we must always understand is that heritage is from within the people with whom love the club. And I think at different times football's been disrespectful about that. Even in terminology, I've heard people call supporters punters and these sorts of things. No, hang on. These people are the most important people in the whole organisation. You treat them with respect because they love it more than anyone does. And you see that in the faces when we have a great win, whether it's a 4 or 5 year old kid. And if you're a 4 or 5 year old kid going to the footy now, it might be your first experiences of watching, the Demons actually win, through to a 70 or 80 year old who's a veteran who can tell you about the great players. They can tell you about Froggy Crompton kicking the winning goal, or they can tell you what it was like when we had Norm Smith and Jack Miller. These people live it and love it and understand it better than anyone else. So, as I said, the most important reflection is not just the great achievements of our great club, but always recognising the most significant people is that where the heritage comes within them. And I can actually always ask them the question, I say, is there one other thing in your life which has been consistent as your love of the Melbourne Football Club? And they can go through where they went to school, they can go through relationships, they can go through even in some cases religion, but they haven't changed the footy club they support. And that's the most important thing that any club can have. Thanks very much.